You didn't fail at eating clean. Your brain was redesigned to make sure you couldn't. And I don't mean that loosely. I mean that after 6 weeks of regular exposure to ultra-processed food, measurable structural changes occur in the brain's reward circuitry. Changes that make real food feel genuinely insufficient, make hunger signals unreliable, and make stopping feel like swimming against a current you cannot see. This is not a discipline problem, it is a biological state. And the reason most clean eating attempts collapse somewhere between week 2 and week 4 is not lack of commitment. It is that nobody told you two separate biological systems were broken simultaneously, and you were only trying to fix the one you could feel. Let me give you something useful before I explain any of the mechanism. 4 questions. Answer them honestly right now. First, when you eat a simple, unprocessed meal, grilled fish, vegetables, plain rice, does it feel complete? Or does it feel like something is missing, like the meal ended before it was supposed to? Second, do you find yourself wanting a specific flavor or texture within 20 to 30 minutes of finishing a meal? Not because you are hungry, but because the meal felt unfinished. Third, has your tolerance for sweetness or saltiness changed over the years? Does food need to be more intense now to feel satisfying? Fourth, do you ever eat past the point of fullness? Not because you decided to, but because stopping felt genuinely hard, like the signal to stop arrived late or not at all. If 2 or more of those are true, your reward threshold has shifted. That is not a moral assessment. It is a biological state with a specific mechanism. And the reason I am starting here is that most people who try to eat better are doing so without knowing which system in their body has actually changed. They feel the failure. They do not know the name of what failed, so they blame themselves. And then they try harder next time using the same broken instruments. Here is the first thing I want you to take from this video, before we go any deeper into the biology. The fact that real food feels insufficient to you is not a preference. It is a threshold problem. The reward system in your brain was calibrated by repeated exposure to engineered stimulation, and it adapted upward. This means the moderate signal produced by real food now falls below the detection line. The food did not get worse, your floor got higher. And the single most important move you can make, before changing your diet, before removing anything, before adding anything, is to understand that you are not fighting appetite. You are working with a system whose sensitivity has been altered. That changes what you do first. Hold that. Now let me show you exactly what happened inside. The brain structure at the center of this is the nucleus accumbens, the core of the reward circuit. Under normal conditions, eating food that meets your body's needs produces a moderate dopamine signal, enough to register satisfaction, enough to reinforce the behavior, enough to tell the system, that was the right move, we are done now. Ultra-processed food produces a signal that is physiologically outsized. These products are engineered, and I use that word precisely, not as commentary but as description, to hit what food scientists call the bliss point. The specific combination of fat, sugar, and salt that generates the maximum dopamine response the system is capable of producing. Not a moderate reward, a supraphysiological one. What happens after repeated exposure to supraphysiological stimulation is the same thing that happens in any biological system overwhelmed by excessive signal. The receivers reduce. The D2 dopamine receptors in the reward circuit decrease in density. The threshold rises. And now, the moderate signal that real food produces no longer clears the bar. The apple, the salmon, the bowl of oats, they register as insufficient, not unpleasant, just not enough. I want to be precise about the human evidence here because I think this is important to understand clearly. The clearest controlled trial on this was published in Cell Metabolism in 2019, Kevin Hall's group at the National Institutes of Health. 20 adults, 4 weeks, 2 diets. 1 ultra-processed, 1 unprocessed, carefully matched for total calories, sugar, fat, fiber, and macronutrients. Participants could eat as much or as little as they wanted. The ultra-processed group consumed on average 500 extra calories per day. Not because the food rated higher for pleasantness, both groups rated their meals similarly for taste and enjoyment. They ate more because the regulatory signal broke down. The mechanism that tells the brain the eating episode is complete stopped working with the same reliability. 500 calories per day, not from desire, from a broken break. Now, this is where most explanations stop, and this is exactly where people keep failing, because stopping here leads to the wrong fix. There is a second system, and it operates independently of the dopamine circuit, which means you can address the reward threshold and still feel like something is missing because the second pathway is still degraded. This is the gut-brain axis, and this is the part that determines whether your attempts at eating better stabilize or keep collapsing. Your gut and your brain maintain continuous bidirectional communication through the vagus nerve, a direct neural pathway carrying signals in both directions, roughly 80% of traffic flowing upward from gut to brain. Under healthy conditions, the gut's enteric nervous system monitors what you are eating in real time and sends satiety and completeness signals upward. You feel full, you feel done. The meal ends with a clean signal. Ultra-processed food disrupts this in two distinct ways. The first is speed. These products are engineered for rapid absorption, fiber removed or chemically reduced, particle size minimized. The gut sensors that normally track nutrient arrival and signal satiety have less time to respond before the food is already past them. The satiety signal arrives late, or arrives incomplete. You finish the meal and the system has not caught up yet. The second disruption is more durable and more consequential. Ultra-processed food is strongly associated with dysbiosis, a shift in the gut microbiome toward bacterial populations that produce less butyrate. Butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid, and I want to be specific about why it matters here. It is not just fuel for intestinal cells. It is a direct modulator of vagal signaling. Lower butyrate, weaker vagal tone, and the gut-to-brain satiety signal loses resolution. The message still sends, but it arrives faint, the way a voice sounds on a call with poor reception. Technically present, not clearly heard. I want to be honest about the evidence on this second pathway because intellectual honesty matters here. The association between ultra-processed food and dysbiosis is well supported. The link between butyrate and vagal tone is supported by animal models and emerging human data. The full mechanistic chain from UPF to dysbiosis to degraded satiety signaling in humans is directionally compelling but not yet completely resolved. I would not call it settled. I would call it strong enough to act on, especially because the action it calls for carries no risk. So now you have two systems, a reward circuit whose threshold has risen, a gut-brain signal that is arriving too faint and too late, and you have been trying to navigate both of them with willpower alone. This is not a character problem, it is a two-system engineering failure. And trying to override it with discipline is like trying to drive with no speedometer and no brakes and telling yourself to concentrate harder. The instruments are broken, concentration is not the repair. Here is the action map. 2 systems, 6 tools. You run them in parallel. They operate on different timelines, but both start now. Lever 1 is reward recalibration. The goal is to let the dopamine system resensitize by reducing the superphysiological signal load. 3 tools. First, 1 unprocessed anchor meal per day, minimum, not a total overhaul. 1 meal, fully unprocessed, nothing engineered, introduced as a daily contrast signal. The brain needs repeated exposure to moderate stimulation to begin upregulating receptor density. This is the most important lever and the least dramatic. You are not eliminating anything yet. You are introducing a daily recalibration signal. Second, flavor complexity over flavor intensity. Ultra-processed food wins on intensity, maximum signal, every time. Real food wins on complexity, bitterness, umami, fermented notes, astringency. These activate different receptor populations and begin to expand what the reward system recognizes as satisfying. Deliberately incorporating bitter and fermented foods, dark leafy greens, high-quality olive oil, kefir, kimchi, begins rebuilding the bandwidth of what triggers satisfaction. You are not replacing intensity with nothing, you are replacing it with range. Third, eating pace. This one gets dismissed and it should not be. Dopamine processing in the reward circuit requires time. Eating in under 8 minutes compresses the signal. The Hall study subjects in the ultra-processed group ate significantly faster. Speed was part of the mechanism, not incidental to it. Slowing the meal to 15 minutes minimum gives the reward system time to register what it received. The food does not change, the signal resolution does. Lever 2 is gut-brain signal restoration. The goal is to rebuild vagal tone and butyrate production on a 4 to 6 week timeline. 3 tools. First, fermentable fiber from whole food sources. Not fiber supplements, not fiber-enriched processed products. Intact plant fiber from cooked and cooled potatoes, legumes, oats, green bananas. These are the primary substrates for butyrate-producing bacterial populations. 25 grams per day from whole sources is the floor, not the ceiling. Second, fermented foods, daily. Not for a romantic concept of good bacteria, but for direct short-chain fatty acid contribution and documented vagal tone effects. 2 consistent servings per day. Plain kefir, live culture yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso. Small amounts, daily exposure. The timeline for measurable microbiome compositional shifts is approximately 4 weeks of consistent intake. Third, meal timing regularity. The vagus nerve's satiety sensitivity is modulated by circadian rhythm. Irregular meal timing, highly variable windows, and very late eating all degrade vagal calibration. This does not mean rigid scheduling, it means consistent anchors. First meal within 90 minutes of waking, last meal at least 2 hours before sleep. Predictable timing improves the resolution of the signal. 2 systems, 6 tools. You start both today. They are not sequential, they are parallel. Now I want to give you a realistic week-by-week expectation, because the way this process is usually described sets people up to quit at the moment it is actually starting to work. Week 1 is hard. The reward threshold is still shifted. Real food still registers as insufficient. The gut-brain signal has not yet improved. You are doing the right things and not yet feeling them work. This is not failure. This is the lag phase. It is not willpower refusing to engage. It is biology operating on its own timeline. Somewhere in week 2, the edges of the response begin to change, not dramatically. A meal that would have felt incomplete 2 weeks ago starts to feel not satisfying, but not hollow either. The signal is beginning to arrive more clearly. If you stop here because things feel better, the threshold has not yet reset. This is the exit point for most people who fail. Week 3 brings the first clear subjective shift. Food tastes differently. The contrast meal that felt like a punishment in week 1 starts to feel adequate. This is receptor upregulation becoming subjectively noticeable. You did not acquire willpower, your brain moved. By week 4, 2 systems are improving simultaneously. The reward circuit is partially resensitized. The gut-brain signal is beginning to recover. The work becomes genuinely easier, not because of discipline, but because the instruments are starting to function again. But here's the thing I want you to hold on to, because it is the part nobody says clearly enough. The window to lock in the change does not close at week 3. 3 weeks is when you first feel it working. The full resensitization, the point at which the system is stable enough to maintain without active effort, is closer to 10 to 12 weeks. Returning to regular ultra-processed food before that window closes resets the clock. Not entirely. The gut microbiome retains some compositional memory, but close enough to the start that the next attempt begins from nearly the same place. The relapse point is not week 1 when things are hard. The relapse point is week 4 or 5 when things are better and the urgency has faded. That is the moment to be careful. Not as a threat, as an orientation. You are not fighting appetite indefinitely. You are protecting a biological process that is still completing. One more thing, and I want to say this carefully. Sometimes this is not a lifestyle puzzle. If you are experiencing persistent fatigue, extreme difficulty controlling food intake, significant mood changes, or major metabolic symptoms, despite making consistent changes, that is not a willpower problem and it is not a threshold problem. That is a reason to be evaluated by someone who can look at you specifically. The biology I described today is real and well supported, and it also does not explain everything. Knowing the mechanism does not replace a thorough clinical picture when something is seriously off. You are not fighting your appetite. You are recalibrating 2 biological systems that were changed without your knowledge, on a timeline you now understand, with a set of tools that actually reach the right level. That is a different problem than the one you thought you had, and a different problem has a different solution.